class, welcome back. Today we're going to enter into our skeptical phase of the class where we have to look at what is skepticism. It's a challenge to reason, it's a challenge to the possibility that we could know, and how would we respond to skepticism? So skepticism is the view that says nobody can be certain. We can't really have a position that is objective, that corresponds to reality, that applies to all people. So we have a lot of different perspectives. So we want to see in philosophy, is that true? Can we have knowledge? Socrates, a famous philosopher, thought we could. So let's see if he's right. Last time we talked about reason and the laws of thought. Now we'll enter into a phase where we see, is that reason going to stand up? Now, I should also mention there's something called fideism, which is blind faith or blind belief, belief without proof, belief without understanding. And that is the, religious version of skepticism, let's say. Fideism is the religious version of skepticism. It says we really can't have certainty, so we just have to believe. And we'll talk about why that happens. I'll just mention it now. Fideism seems to happen because it accepts the assumptions of skepticism and sees that if we're consistent with skepticism, if nobody can really know for sure, then we can't know what's real and we can't know what the good life is. And this leads to a kind of meaninglessness or what's called nihilism. And the religious person sees the danger in that. And so they want to preserve meaning in a religious way, and so they make the leap, the blind belief. I'm going to suggest we don't have to go either way. Philosophy has an alternative to offer. So let's look at this handout, Responses to Popular Skepticism. Now, if you look, there's a statement, we'll call that the skeptical statement, and then there are two responses. R1 is response 1, R2 is response 2. Now you should take notes. You should know what is the skeptical claim, what are the two responses. And on your note card, put the claim. What are the responses to there are so many views on one side, and then the two responses on the other side. Put this into your long-term memory and know it because you're going to see these claims all over the place, and I want you to have a ready response, even if it's just talking to yourself. I'll tell you a funny story. I used to go to this Starbucks and hang out between jobs. I taught at two different colleges, and I had about 2 hours every day where I was between jobs. And so I would go to Starbucks and read and study, and sometimes I would do my philosophy homework there and write note cards up, and someone would come to my table and say, "Hey, what are you studying?" And I'd say, "Oh, I'm studying philosophy." And they'd be, "There's so many views," and they would drop one of these claims on me. They came to my table, right? So you don't want to go, "Wow, that was bizarre and I have no way to counter that. Maybe they're right." You want to go, "Nope, I'm sorry, I have a response to that." So this is like how we can respond to coffee shop skepticism, we'll call it. So notice it's popular skepticism, person on the street skepticism, or maybe internet comment section skepticism, Twitter skepticism. How about that? Okay, so follow with me. And also be thinking to yourself, do I say this? Is this me? Have I said this? And you can now talk yourself out of that saying. Okay, so here's skeptical statement 1. There are so many views. Have you ever heard this? There's so many views. Or have you ever said this? I have a little voice in my head I hear. It's kind of got an attitude. There's so many views. Okay. What does that mean? So many views about what? Wouldn't you want to ask that? So many views about politics, religion. What are we talking about here? Ethics? It doesn't matter. We can stop that roadblock. We can jump over that roadblock. How about that? Here's the response 1. There are not many basic views, only 2. All is eternal or only some is eternal. So remember, basic views have to do with metaphysics. They're not many metaphysical positions, there are only two. Either all is eternal or only some is eternal. And how about, for now, you might have to trust me on that. I'm going to finish the next part of this, and then I'm going to illustrate that to you. All right, so there are not many basic views, only two. Either all or only some is eternal. Response 2 is that there are many degrees of rational consistency with which a basic view is held. So notice, two basic views, many degrees of rational consistency. Now I'm going to pause this and get my iPad so I can draw and show you some more. I'm going to explain this to you in drawing. Okay, I've got the iPad out and I want to show you the square of opposition. So the square of opposition is something we're going to use when we get into metaphysics, but I'm going to introduce it now so we can explain why there are only two basic views. So this is a tool we use in logic. It is your friend, and the square is going to show us contradictory positions. So let's label this the square of opposition. Okay, so each corner represents a different statement, like all, none, some. You've seen these options when you take the SAT exam or something. So let's put this corner is called A, and it says all is eternal. In fact, I'm not even going to have you know that that's an A corner right now. I will teach you all the rules of the square in a future lesson. For now, let's just use this example. This corner is going to say none is eternal. Over here, we have some is eternal. And here, some is not eternal. 4 possibilities, but we were saying there's only 2. So let's think about why. We're going to talk about whether, okay, one more thing I want to show you. These diagonals represent contradictions. And through the law of non-contradiction, we know that something can't both be A and non-A. Something can't be both some is eternal and none is eternal in the same respect and at the same time. It's just not possible. They're contradictions, they're opposites. It's either one or the other. Same here. Either all is eternal or some is not eternal. Those are contradictions. I will teach you about this in detail in the future. But for now, we want to ask, is this true? And if some is eternal is true, then the contradiction would be false. Okay? But how would we know that? How can we use reason to answer this question, is something eternal? This is going to be your first argument. Ooh, that's exciting. Your first argument in philosophy is that something must be eternal. Now, let me first go through the argument, and then I will write it up as a quiz question and show you what you need to know for the purposes of your notes. For now, write this down. Put this in your notes and save it. I'm going to erase some things. I'm going to erase this corner and this corner to get them out of our way, because we're not talking about those two right now. We're talking about, is some eternal true? If so, the contradiction, none is eternal, would have to be false. So we are going to use reason as a test for meaning to evaluate this sentence, which is a judgment, to see if it's true or false. Do you think we can do that? We can. So here's what we're going to do. What does this statement mean? Nothing is eternal. Well, remember, we already defined eternal as something that has no beginning and no end. So if nothing is eternal, this means the same thing as all or everything is temporal. non-eternal, right? What does that mean, though? Let's analyze the term. All is temporal means all had a beginning. Why? Because that's just what temporal means. All had a beginning. Okay, let's think about the implications of that. If everything that exists currently and in the past had a beginning, then the very first thing had a beginning too. Everything came into being, and everything came into being, including the first being, from what? Where did that first thing come from? There wasn't anything before it, so it would have been from non-being. All came into being from non-being. Now, what does that mean? Let's analyze our terms again. Isn't this fun, analyzing terms? What is being and what is non-being? Can we define those things? Being is something that exists. So we can say being, I just don't want to run out of room here, exists. And if it exists, it has qualities. It's matter or spirit. It's temporal or eternal. It has properties, let's call them. And if it has properties and it exists, then it has power as well. The power to be. Matter has power. Mind has power. And if it exists, it has the power to continue into the next moment, right? What is non-being then? Have you ever wondered that? Does non-being exist? No. So let's think about non-being does not exist. That's a negation sign, the little tilde. Doesn't exist. If it doesn't exist, can it be matter? Can it be spirit? Can it have properties of any kind? No, it has no properties. Can it have any power? No, if it doesn't have matter, it doesn't have power. If it doesn't have mind, it doesn't have power, so it has no power. So can that which is non-being give rise to being? No, that's impossible. You cannot get being from non-being. This is also part of reason is ontological. Remember, I promised you I would show that to you, so here it is. So take notes on this because I need to erase. All came into being from non-being doesn't make any sense, so we're going to erase the purple. The purple was me explaining. You don't need that part for any quiz. You should know it though in case you want to tell your friends. So what's the conclusion? This violates the laws of thought. Oh man. And it's impossible. So, if none is eternal means all is temporal, means all had a beginning, means all came into being, means all came into being from non-being, and this is impossible, then this is false. And that just went away. Then this is false, which means we can erase the true question mark over here, and some is eternal must be true. Look at that, an argument. Wasn't that exciting? The power of reason. Something out there must be eternal. Okay, so that's a deep metaphysical truth I'll let you grapple with. But in the meantime, I want you to know this. I want you to know this for a quiz. I want you to put this on a note card and learn it. So I'm going to ask the question, what is the argument that something must be eternal? Okay, this is a core question. What is the argument that something must be eternal? And the answer is some is eternal is true because the contradiction none is eternal is impossible. And then I want you to show me why. For these reasons. For these reasons. You probably just lost that, right? I hope you can see that. All right. This is on a handout, I think, called Presupposition, Our Most Basic Belief. It will come up again when we finish this unit on skepticism. But for now, I want you to know this because it goes back to the handout we're working on currently. I am going to erase this page and draw it again, clean it up, and show you one other thing. All is eternal. None is eternal. Some is eternal. And some is not eternal. All right, here were our original options. Remember, we're asking the question, are there really so many views, or are there only two basic views? All right, so we, through the argument that I just gave you, eliminated none is eternal. That is not a logical option for metaphysics. But we do have three corners still, and we're saying there's two views. So why is that? Here's why. Because all is eternal may include some is eternal. If everything is always, then some things are also part of that. Or perhaps these two are true together. Some is and some is not. That's an alternative. So we want to see which one is it. And if we go some is eternal plus some is not eternal, we get this new corner over here. Let's do it in red. Only some is eternal. So now we have two options. All is eternal or only some is eternal. And only some is a combination of those two. So now we have two options. And we can answer the question that we were originally looking at. Here, there are so many views. There are not many basic views, only two. All or only some is eternal. And now you see how we got there. But notice the second response. There are many degrees of rational consistency with which a basic view is held. So let's go back to the square. And I want to show you one other thing about this cool square. When we have those two corners, all is eternal and only some is eternal, we also have different degrees of rational consistency with which each of these views is held. And we also have historically held philosophical positions and all the world's religions, which fall under each of these. So under all is eternal, maybe all is material, matter. Remember, matter is something that has size and is not conscious. Well, maybe everything is matter. So that's called material monism. Put this in your notes. Material monism says there's one thing, mono, and that thing is eternal and it's matter, extended. That is a historic position in the West. It's a logical option, and we will look at it when we do metaphysics. The next logical option is spiritual monism. All is one, and it's non-material, it's spirit, it's mind, it's thinking, it's conscious, and it's forever. Those two views can't be true at the same time because they're mutually exclusive. Then there's another option called dualism. Dualism says there's two things that are eternal, matter and spirit. This is a historic position, and we'll see it in Plato and Aristotle. We will also see spiritual monism in philosophical Hinduism. Maybe I should write those things down. Let me do the other one first. The contradiction, remember they can't both be true, can't both be false, is that only some is eternal. And this would be theism and deism. What are those views? Theism says God creates and rules. Deism says God creates and does not rule. Okay. God creates and rules. Theism. God creates but does not rule. Deism. Now, all is eternal and only some is eternal are contradictory. They can't both be true and they can't both be false. In addition, all the world's religions fall into these philosophical categories in terms of their basic beliefs. So we've been talking about basic beliefs, basic assumptions. These are the basic beliefs. All is eternal or only some is eternal. And let's look at some of the positions that fall under each. So under material monism, we have the first, I'm just going to talk and not write, the first philosophers of the West. We'll do a history lesson where we look at each of these. And contemporary secular philosophy is material monist. So the new atheist movement is material monist. Spiritual monism, like I mentioned, it's called idealism in philosophy. George Berkeley was an idealist. He thought all that exists are minds and ideas, God's mind, and our minds are in God's mind. Matter doesn't really exist. In Eastern Hindu philosophies, we'll look at two different ones, Advaita Vedanta and Dvaita Vedanta. They both believe matter is not real. All is spirit and all is one. Dualism, I mentioned Plato and Aristotle. That's Greek dualism. There's also dualism in some Middle Eastern early religions and in Latter-day Saints. Only some is eternal. Theism would include Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, and all the various forms and divisions there are in each of those. And deism is a modern view that some of the founding fathers of the United States held to. So this is just to show you what's going on in number one. There are not many basic views, only two, and we went over the square of opposition to show you the two. Either everything is eternal, all, or not everything is eternal. Maybe just God is eternal and everything else is temporal and created. And I also showed you that there are many degrees of rational consistency with which a basic view is held. That's where we get all these different views falling under them, and we could even split this up even more. And so when you start looking at the less conscious, less consistent beliefs that fall under these big categories, all is eternal, only some is eternal, then we start to see what people might be getting hung up on when they say there are so many views. Catholics, Protestants, Mormons, Muslims, all these views, nobody can really know. We can say, whoa, wait a minute. Those views can be categorized as everything's eternal or only some things are eternal. And we can critically analyze those too, because you know what? Not both can't be true, both can't be false in the same respect at the same time. So when we go back to the square, either all is eternal is true or only some is eternal is true. Meaning that's how reality is. They can't both be true at the same time because they're contradictory. So it has to be one or the other. Now the question we are dealing with is epistemology. Can we know which one? And skepticism says no. Socrates would say yes. So we have to look at both options, no or yes. Okay, I'm going to pause here because I'm going long, but I want to use that square when we pick up with this next one. It doesn't matter which view you hold, because that square is going to help us answer this question too. So thank you for your patience. You've got 2 exam questions coming so far. 1, what are the 2 responses to? It doesn't matter which view you hold. I'm sorry. What are the 2 responses to there are so many views? And what is the argument that something must be eternal? 2 quiz questions from this video. Okay? Next time, we're going to finish this handout, I hope.